Welcome again to Fancounters. My name's Nick.
And I'm Elizabeth.
And this week we've got a Broadway legend on the show.
I know, I'm so excited to talk to him.
Yes, we're going to tell you about that in just a second. But ever since I started doing this podcast, I have listened to other shows.
Yes.
Kind of to see what they're about. And by the way, if you want to interact with this show before we get too far, go to facebook.com/fancounters. You can join our group there, or you can email us at hello@fancounters.com. Back to my point. Started listening to other podcasts, and I was in this forum, and they're like, this podcast is so horrible, and you shouldn't listen to it, and da-da-da. Well, what am I going to do then?
You're going to listen to it.
I'm going to go check it out, right?
Yeah.
So the podcast is called Who Are These Podcasts? And what it is really just the host of the show has different co-hosts from what I found from different episodes. But they go through other people's podcasts, like maybe ours someday, hopefully.
Well, only if they like it.
Only if they like it. Because what they really do is point out how horrible some of these podcasts are.
Yes. And I followed suit and listened to one.
Yes.
And they were just mean. They're mean boys.
They were not nice. We listened to one called...
The Vanished.
Yeah, about missing people. But they point out very obvious things. Like, I'm not going to go too far into it, but to give our audience an example of what we're talking about, the woman who hosts the show is very monotone.
She sounds like she's from NPR.
Yeah, exactly.
I think she was intentionally trying to sound like NPR because I think she wants them to be more newsy than they really are. Because that's what I took from it, that she really wanted it to be, like legitimate news. But I couldn't disagree with their...
the rehashing of information that she kept doing.
Critique of how she kept rehashing the information. But still, the other thing is that, we work really hard on this podcast, and I'm sure she does too.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is that we all have critics, no matter what. But their whole podcast's job is to rip on other podcasts.
Right.
And I think that really, I don't know, did you listen to enough to find one where they liked a podcast?
Yeah, actually, they have liked some podcasts.
Okay, so there are some positive ones that they think are worth listening to?
I haven't run into many, but yes.
Yeah, y'all need a better job.
I just thought it was an interesting idea for a show, and they are quite entertaining to listen to.
And they have bad language.
Yeah, it is definitely not safe for work.
It's not family friendly.
No. So just checking out different podcasts, and that was one I ran into.
I say no.
She says no.
They were mean.
All right, let's go into a happier thing.
Yes, I'm so excited to do this one today. I love Broadway.
All right, Bill Nabel's here. He is best known for his appearance for the entire run of Disney's Beauty and the Beast on Broadway. He was there from the very start of that show. He did original readings for Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg. He appeared in over 9,000 Broadway performances, including his theatrical debut as Tony in The West Side Story under Leonard Bernstein. And while most of his appearances were in Beauty and the Beast and 42nd Street, he also appeared in A Chorus Line, Sweeney Todd, one show of Home Sweet Homer, he's going to tell us about that, Ain't Broadway Grand, Evita, and The Most Happy Fella.
Bill is also a playwright who wrote Take Me America, which was cited as one of the must-sees in New York Magazine. He also wrote a musical called Love on Ice, which is based on a man who freezes his wife who died of cancer in hopes of reuniting her in the future. We'll ask him about where that show stands in our interview today.
All right, so let's get started today.
Here's Bill Nabel.
Coming to you from nowhere near the entertainment capital of the world, this is Fancounters, the podcast.
You're amazing. You need to come to Hollywood. I'm going to make you famous.
There was this mob of people, and they're screaming my name.
Crazy fans.
Stop following me. Don't come around my house. If you do, the cops are going to be at yours.
I think this guy wants to fight me. Ended up being a fan.
There's just security guards with M16
holding fans back.
Are you kidding me?
I continually will get stopped.
Can I take a picture? Oh my God.
I definitely declined signing body parts.
Oh, I don't want to go there.
I'm the only one that's ever been on Sam Jackson and lived to tell about it.
That's why we call it Fancounters.
I don't think you're going to last on the air very long.
Thanks, Bill, so much for joining us. We're excited to have you on Fancounters.
Yes, thank you.
Happy to be here.
Good. Now, well, we haven't met in person, but I did see you twice last month when you played Kris Kringle in Miracle on 34th Street.
Then we met in person.
Well, yes, but this is our first time we get to talk, so I'm pretty excited about that. So it was at a dinner theater here in Wisconsin. Now, you live in Connecticut. So
Correct.
talk about how you got to take a role in this small Wisconsin town.
This is the second show I've done at the Fireside, and I did How to Succeed for them, I guess about 5 years ago. I didn't know about the actors, are always trolling the audition lists, and How to Succeed is a show I've always wanted to do.
Okay.
And so I auditioned, and Ed Flesch, in his wisdom, hired me. And when I fell in love with the theater. Ed is a terrific director. The theater itself, the physical theater, is in the round, and it has a lift in the middle, an elevator, that was wonderfully suited for How to Succeed. In fact, in my mind, it's the best production I've ever seen, because scenes could come out of the floor. And it was just a terrific production with a wonderful cast and a wonderful director, and I would be back there in a New York minute, I think is the expression. And I'm always happy to be there. I audition for them whenever I'm right for something, and they don't always hire me, but they hired me for this, and I think it worked out really great for everybody.
Now, do you have ties to Wisconsin at all?
None. I do now.
Yeah, no kidding.
We're here.
But prior to this, no.
Now, for our audience, who obviously 99.9% of the people have not been to the Fireside to see this, the stage really is unique because, like Bill was saying, there is that lift in the middle. So it's like a circular portion that goes down, way down into the floor. In fact, for the front row people, we're always like up in our seats to see what's going on down there. But it's really unique. So then there is a hole in the floor while they're performing on the outsides of it, while they get the scene ready. And then the lift comes up with the actors on it, and it's like magic.
Cool.
And I'll tell you why I get so tickled about it. I've done 8 Broadway shows, and they can't do this on Broadway. To put an elevator like that in a Broadway stage, number one, it would be physically difficult because of the space, because space in New York theaters is very, very limited. And number two, nobody could pay for it. It's terrifically expensive to do, and I don't know when the Klopsic family, who are the owners of the Fireside, I don't know when they did it, but it's very unique. It's really terrific, and it allows you to do all kinds of things in a play or in a musical that are really wonderful. And I get tickled every time I see it and work with it and do shows there.
I actually didn't know that theater actors traveled for, I'm not going to call the Fireside a small time show, but it kind of is in the grand scheme of things. So is this common? Like, do you go to different states to do performances often? Oh, you do?
Oh, yeah. They don't call us gypsies for nothing. In fact, I mean, I'm the exception. I mean, I did about 35 years on Broadway straight, and but now that I'm not, when I don't have Broadway work, I go where the work is, and New York actors audition for jobs all over the country, if not all over the world, and so producers come to New York, and we are gypsies, to be sure.
What will you remember about being in the musical version of Miracle on 34th Street?
It was really a great role, and it was the role itself. I mean, it's obviously based on the movie, but the Broadway show was written by Meredith Willson, who was the genius that was associated with The Music Man, which is a genius show. And he wrote the musical version and eventually the Broadway version of Miracle on 34th Street, and it was called Here's Love. And somebody in their wisdom at one point decided that Miracle on 34th Street, which is the movie title, would sell a lot better than Here's Love, and in fact it has. But so the role really drew me to the show, and but the original Broadway version is very dated, and Ed Flesch had to find a way to handle not only that but the structure of the show, and he did it with using old-time newsreels. And so he incorporated old-time footage from the 50s in newsreels, and then he shot some new stuff that was supposedly shot in the 50s with us,
right,
to fill in the gaps. And there are musical gaps in the second act, but Ed was very smart in using the newsreels, and it really made the show.
When I read in that program that you were in over 9,000 Broadway performances, I just knew that you were somebody we wanted to talk to. So Elizabeth and I talked about Beauty and the Beast at the top of the show, and when we spoke to you last week to set this up, you mentioned that show was a big percentage of your performances on Broadway, so I kind of want to start there.
Sure.
So Beauty and the Beast was a show where you were there from the very beginning. So take us back to 1992. Talk to us a little bit about what you were doing when you first learned of it becoming a musical and how you got involved to be at the original first reading.
Well, yeah, I was there before the beginning because they called me. The casting people called me in to do some readings for the show. They did 2 of them, and at that time, the Alan Menken and Howard Ashman and Linda Wolverton had written the movie, and they decided at the theme park in Florida to do a tab version for the park, and they did it. It was about a half-hour show, and the guy that directed in the park noticed that they got a nice response. Well, he approached Disney to do the show, and Disney had never done a show before. They didn't have a theater department. The only theater they had done was in the parks, and they had never done a Broadway show. And they didn't know if it would work. So they called us in to do readings, and I did 2 of the readings, and Jeffrey Katzenberg was there. It was Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg,
there you go,
who were the heads of Disney. And they came to the readings. Michael Eisner at the same time owned the Los Angeles Ducks, the hockey team. He walked in with his Ducks hat on, and of course, later on in life, Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg, who went on to create DreamWorks, were known because they were suing each other for everything imaginable. But at that point, they were sitting next to each other, and they liked what they saw. They decided to take the show to Houston, Theater Under the Stars, and try it out. And then once they saw the tryout, they would make a decision as to whether to bring it to Broadway. So it was never a given. It started as readings, and the rest is history, as they say.
So when they took the show to Houston to try it out, that's a common thing for Broadway, right? They take it to a small regional place and kind of work the kinks out?
They used to do it more than they do now. They try to take it, they try to go regional with it. Sometimes they take it to a nonprofit. They might take it to a university. In the old days, they used to do a tour. They used to tour nationally, but that's too expensive now to do. The producers make deals, and God knows Disney makes deals. Makes deals. And they figure out a way to develop the show. And the way they developed The Beauty and the Beast was to take it to Theater Under the Stars. It was very happy, to align with Disney and to try out the show.
So when you're doing that, is each show different because you're tweaking it? Or are you just...
yeah, the show changes. Yeah, that's we do it. That we were in rehearsal. I think. Given that the whole run was a tryout period, they could call us for 5 hours rehearsal every day, and they frequently did.
Okay. And so how long did that test in Houston?
We were there about 3 months, 3 or 4 months. We spent Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's there.
Oh.
Trying out the show.
Okay. So when you learn from the test shows, you make tweaks on like makeup and costumes and prosthetics and things like that. And it actually ended up winning a Tony Award for Best Costume Design. Is that correct?
Yes, it did.
Nice.
Now you started
but
out.
The tweaks,
go ahead.
The tweaks also happen in the book. Things. What you describe, on the technical end certainly happens. But if the guts of the show doesn't work, if the story doesn't work, if the songs are right or wrong, that's why you're there. Because the technical side will always work itself out.
Right.
Although in this case, we did have costume problems and pyrotechnical problems that were really fundamental to the show and were dealt with down there.
Now, Bill, you started out in the ensemble before moving on to understudying for a lot of the main characters in the show, Maurice, Lumineer, Cogsworth, among some. How did you make sure, and this is always fascinating to me when I go to a Broadway show that tours or whatever, that there are so many people that will understudy multiple roles. So how do you prepare for each role so that you can perform at your top level with almost no notice?
I was originally hired to cover Lumiere, and eventually they added Cogsworth and Maurice and Monsieur Dark. Parenthetically, because I covered all those roles, for 3 years I couldn't take a vacation because they didn't hire anybody to cover me, and they wouldn't let me go. I couldn't take a vacation for 3 years. But there are, understudies get vacations, but at the very top of a show, an understudy sits in on all the stagings, with the principals, because he's once it's staged, you're responsible for it. In fact, something very interesting at the Fireside just happened. They're doing Phantom now, and the guy playing the Phantom got sick on just before opening night and missed 3 performances. The understudy had no rehearsal.
Oh, wow.
And he went on and ended up doing I think the first show and maybe the second one with no rehearsal at all. But he had done his work. He learned the show. He learned his show. He learned the principal's show, and went on. And that's what the role. That's the job. You have to be prepared. You're hired to understudy, and if the principal goes out on the first night, you're on, as they say.
What's your process for learning and perfecting each role?
It was interesting actually learning Miracle on 34th Street because there's a lot of stuff. I mean, Kris Kringle has 5 songs, and he's on for virtually the entire first act and half of the second act. And I started learning the show about 2 months before the first rehearsal, and because of my dance background, I think there's certainly a road process of memorization, but a show never really comes together for me until I stage it, because you start making associations with the people you're talking to, with where you are on stage, and as you make those associations, the memorization gets easier. Mm-hmm. I like to say, I don't really know a show until my feet know it.
Okay.
So there's certainly obviously rote memorization, but for me, it really comes together once the staging begins. The show never really comes together for me until the audience is there, and I can be on stage, and be alone with the audience, so to speak. Having an audience there really focuses me on the character, because it just becomes about the story, and I'm just, to me, it's describing the story to the audience. So the third component of memorization for me is having an audience there.
What was your favorite moment during the run of Beauty and the Beast? And you had a long time to find a moment.
I think it was the first time I did Be Our Guest at the response to it. Because it's a crazy number. It's just wild, and it's set up to be a showstopper, and it does stop the show. And I think most memorable to me is the audience response the first time that I did it. So I think that would be.
It is a spectacular number.
It was wild. It was crazy.
Yeah,
it was great.
You've been told to break a leg probably 1,000 times in your career. But during the run of Beauty and the Beast, you were actually hit by a car on Central Park West. You missed a month of the show because of that broken leg. What happened?
I was I was writing at the time. I was attending a playwriting seminar at the Y on 67th Street, and I was walking with the instructor, and we were crossing Central Park West. A car came down Central Park West and missed the turnoff and was going the wrong way. And so I was looking the wrong way as we crossed, and so he hit me and threw me about 40 feet. And I broke a leg, I broke a wrist, I had rib contusions. I was out. He beat me up good, but
you only missed a month?
No, I missed. I missed about 6 weeks, I think.
Oh my gosh!
And it was a long time getting back, but stuff happens.
So Beauty and the Beast ran on Broadway for 13 years.
Yes.
And you were in the original cast and stayed for the entire run.
Yes.
You were the only one to stay the whole time? Is that correct?
Yes.
That is outstanding.
Well, I had two kids in college at the same time.
Oh.
So I had
no choice.
No, my children are 1.5 years apart. They were both in college at the same time, and so I was gonna. The business is crazy enough as far as the duration of employment, and nobody knows that better than me. So so I was committed, and I had two tuitions to pay, and so I wasn't looking really hard. I did start writing though, to keep the juices going, and I wrote. I started 2 musicals there, one of which got produced, and so my outlet became writing. And it was great because I would write stuff, and and then I would bring the work that I had run to the actors in the show and say, will you read this for me?
Oh, okay.
And so I had Broadway actors trying out my stuff, on the spot, which is great. So
that's a pretty cool way to find out if it works or not.
Yeah, that's neat.
Right. Take it. So I had wonderful feedback, and people were happy to do it. And so it you make it work. It was. I was never trapped there. I had an outlet. I had a job, and I was working in the theater, which is a whole lot better than saying you're working in the theater and waiting tables.
Right.
Sure.
So I was happy. It was good.
Awesome. When you do a show so many times, night after night after night, is there something behind the scenes that keeps the cast going and keeping things fresh?
Well, that's an individual thing. You have to take it upon yourself. One of my favorite things, I'm human, and that I would feel that slip in every once in a while. And when it did, I would take a half hour before half hour and walk out into the lobby of the theater and stand by the box office and watch people pay to see me perform. And I would just stand there and watch. And watch their excitement, watch them fork over their hard-earned money, to come and see our show, and that usually did it.
Well, that's a really cool way to get the energy from the audience before the show even starts.
Yeah, because there's always a lot of buzz.
It was, and and that's one of my pet peeves is when I go to see a show. I want to see the best performance ever. I don't care if you've been there for 5 years. I'm there that night. I paid.
That's right.
And I want to see, what the authors intended. What the show's about. I don't want to see bored actors on stage.
Right.
So, that's one of my pet peeves too. And that's an actor thing. If you can't figure it out, go wait tables.
Tom Bosley, of course, starred in Happy Days as the dad, but we had no idea he had Broadway roots as well. What was it like working with Tom? He was cast as Belle's father.
Right. Yes, he was.
So tell us.
Tom was great. He fit right in right away. I mean, there are certain stars that come into a show. I've certainly done work on movie sets now. I have an interesting Beauty and the Beast story to tell you too. Sometimes you're not supposed to approach them. Toni Braxton, when the show was not terribly approachable. Donny Osmond was terrific. Being backstage and going out and meeting the audience and standing outside by the stage door after the show. Some people are, some people aren't.
Mm-hmm.
But Tom was fun because part of my staging. He was sitting up on the invention waiting to ride out on stage, and I was standing there. So we would chit chat, and we were talking one day, and it was just before his entrance, and I guess they switched his mic on a little early.
Oh no!
Oh gosh!
The conversation somehow morphed into talking about Star Trek and William Shatner. And, so we're talking, and, William Shatner, so the subject of William Shatner comes up, and apparently his mic went on precisely at the time we said, yeah, Bill Shatner, he's the biggest asshole.
Oh,
no! Oh, man.
Right out in the house.
Oh, it's a hot mic. Oh,
no. But
how do you recover from that?
No, you just go out, stuff happens,
Gosh. That's hilarious.
I think that's why audiences, when stuff like that happens, audiences like it even more because, it's a window into, the human side of people.
That is great.
When stuff goes wrong, people love it, but that was one thing that I remember. And Tom was great. I mean, the wonderful thing about him saying that is that he's the last person that you would think would say anything like that about anybody.
Right.
He was just the nicest guy, but Bill Shatner pushed his buttons, and somehow it pushed the sound man's buttons too, and went out in the house.
That's funny.
Oh man! So you're doing the show a very long time. Do you guys still rehearse during this time, or is it kind of like, all right, been there, done that?
There is understudy rehearsal once a week.
Oh, okay.
Routinely. To keep the understudies up and to maintain the understudies, and sometimes to put new people in. If a new person comes in the cast, they will rehearse them and then put them in, to understudy rehearsal before they actually put them in the show.
Awesome. Now the Tom Bosley story was awesome. Are there any other little known secrets about the show that you can think of to share with us?
As I say, Donny Osmond came in the show. He played Gaston, oddly enough, and he was a little short for it, but he made it. They made up for it with padding his costume, and he looked the role.
Okay,
but he impressed me because he's at the time, he had a pretty sizable concert career,
right?
And maybe a sizable movie career, I would say.
Had he already done Joseph?
I think he had by then.
Okay.
Yes, but he impressed me. I mean, he showed up. He came in even before we saw him. He was in the theater, walking around, following. He was doing Gaston. He was following. He got to know people. He was very friendly. But the best thing he did, to me, was once he opened in the show, people would be standing at the stage door waiting to see him the way people do.
Mm-hmm.
And he came out every day, every performance, and he came out, signed autographs, talked to people, stayed until every last person had spoken to him that wanted to.
Wow. That's cool.
And and not a lot of people do that. Some of the people go out the back door,
mm-hmm.
To avoid, the crush of people.
I think that's an Osmond in general.
It is, but a lot of actors, feel a responsibility.
Yeah.
To bring the human side. I mean, I used to bring. Whenever somebody came to see the show, through me, I would make it a point, to bring them backstage and to get them up on the stage and to show them what backstage looked like and show them the sets and the costumes.
Cool.
That's the human stuff.
That would be an awesome experience.
There's all the glitz and there's all the there's all of that stuff, but doing a little bit more, and there's an appreciation. I mean, people come to the theater. They pay, but I still have people, 10, 15 years coming up to me who, frankly, sometimes I don't remember saying, "You took me backstage at Beauty and the Beast, and we were thrilled, and we've never forgotten it."
Oh.
And that's it.
Yeah. That's a memory you've made.
That's it. They love the show, but they really liked going backstage and talking and seeing what's involved. And I've never forgotten that.
Beauty and the Beast had 4 national tours, even touring after the close on Broadway. Were you ever approached to join the tour?
No.
Interesting.
But at that point I was moving on, and they were moving on, and I had done the show for 13 years. I can't say I felt neglected.
You came up with some really good fan stories. Are there any that really stick out, or did you have any encounters even with other famous people? You mentioned Donny Osmond and Tom Bosley, but either fan-related or celebrity-related, do any stories come into your head that
I've got a good
stick
one.
out?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
I was shooting a movie last year called Professor Marston and His Wonder Women. I don't know if you saw it.
I'm sorry, we did not.
Nope.
Well, it was an indie film, and we shot it in Boston. And it's about William Marston, who was a Harvard professor, and he created the Wonder Woman comic strip.
Ah.
And he also invented the lie detector, parenthetically.
Okay.
But they made a movie about his life, and his life was, frankly, controversial because he lived with 2 women at the same time. They raised his kids, and in fact, after he died, the women stayed together and raised his children. And so, when the Wonder Woman comic strip was running, he had to defend his lifestyle in front of a psychiatrist committee. And so they called me in to play a psychiatrist on this committee, and we shot the film in a hospital in Tewksbury, Massachusetts, and Luke Evans was playing William Marston, and so we were shooting it. We were shooting it for 2 days, and of course the psychiatrists were putting Luke Evans, Professor Marston. They were grilling him and running him over the coals about his lifestyle, and he had to defend himself. And on the second day of our shooting, the trailer for Beauty and the Beast, the movie, came out, and I discovered that he played Gaston in the movie. And so, talk about stars you're not supposed to talk to. On a movie set, you're really not supposed to talk to anybody. But I was interacting with him in the scene, and I felt comfortable. And I guess I'm too old to be intimidated, although maybe I should be. But so I went up to him and I said, I hear the movie of Beauty and the Beast came out. And he said, yeah, my phone is blowing up with with the responses to the trailer. And I said to him, I said to him, you owe me. And he said, why? And I said, I told him that I did the readings and I did the show. And he looked at me and he said, you did the show?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah. And he said, well, and he starts singing "Be Our Guest, Be Our Guest," and doing sunshine, rain things, and and just started singing the song. And I said, careful, Kelby, you're going to get me fired here. And he said, no. He said, I love to sing. And so we would do a take. We do a scene, do a take, and and the director would say cut. He would look over at me and go, "Be our guest," and he did this like all day. It became our little secret. And of course it's it's that thing with you always want to be what you aren't. Singers want to be dancers, dancers want to be singers. Everybody tries to be an actor, But I mean, this guy, Luke Evans is physically perfect. I mean, the thing with movie stars is, they are. There's not a hair out of place. There's not a blemish. Their nose is perfect. When their face is 9 feet tall on the screen, they are perfect. And this guy's going to be our guest. And so I just laughed. We had a fun time. And of course, the movie came out, and he sings. So there you are.
You mentioned playwriting earlier in our interview, and I want to talk about that. But first, you spent some time on some other Broadway shows, A Chorus Line, 42nd Street. But A Chorus Line was your first show, right?
No.
Oh, it wasn't.
My first show was called Home Sweet. It was called Home Sweet Homer.
Okay,
and
I saw that on your
resume.
resume.
Yul Brynner and Joan Diener, who went on to who had by then had done the original Man of La Mancha, and she was Aldonza, and it was written by the Man of La Mancha people. And it was called Home Sweet Homer. It was my first Broadway show. It opened and closed on the same night.
Well, that's not good. Performing in those big theaters, did it exceed your expectations the first time?
Yeah, it was thrilling for me. Yeah.
I think it would be for any actor, but...
Yeah,
it was great. I mean, the Chorus Line was crazy because I got into it. I was the first replacement in New York. And... it was, the reception was crazy. So
awesome. And 42nd Street, you spent a long time doing that show as well.
I did that for 8 years. Yeah.
What sticks out in your mind about that show?
Yeah, I was talking to Ed Flesh about this the other day. They're doing 42nd Street at the Fireside, and I told him, I said, I was talking to actors who have done the show, and I said, do they know the history of the show? Do they know why the show ran? And a lot of them don't. And the story about 42nd Street is that David Merrick produced it, Gower Champion directed it, and Gower Champion died on opening night.
Oh no!
Wow.
And we didn't know. David Merrick knew, because he died in the afternoon. We opened the show that evening.
Oh, man.
And they didn't tell us. Jerry Orbach, Leroy Reams, Wanda Rickert. Wanda Rickert, in fact, was dating Gower Champion at the time. And so, we did the show. There were 8 curtain calls. We were at the Winter Garden. We did 8 curtain calls, and David Merrick walks out after 8 curtain calls. And turns to the audience and says, Gower Champion died this afternoon. Oh. And nobody knew.
Wow.
So, the place went crazy. And they brought the curtain in, and, everybody dealt with it in their own fashion. And then we went to the cast party at the Waldorf.
Oh, man.
Gosh.
But, and people, you talk to people and they don't realize that, Gower Champion died on open. They don't know.
Yeah.
And so and of course Ed Flesh knows. But I made him promise, to tell them, the history of the show. It went on to, God bless him, him dying on opening night, sealed the success of the show. Not that it needed his death to do that, but, it's Broadway lore. And it's important. And a lot of stuff, I'm always amazed at, how the traditions and the history of theater get lost because, film has the studios. The studios always take care of the films, and you always know about the films. And
right.
There's always, there's a PR department to keep those things alive. There's no PR departments for shows. I mean, once the show closes, the PR department is gone.
Moves on, yeah.
Because the producer is in charge of the show. If, once he dies, it's all gone. So, there's nobody taking care of the history of the business, and things get lost, and it's pretty sad.
Well, let's talk about some of your original material because you are also a playwright, a songwriter, and you've got 3 projects in particular that I wanted to discuss. The first one sounds like amazingly interesting. Love on Ice. It features the ghosts of Ted Williams, Walt Disney, and Michael Jackson.
Yes, there are frozen ghosts. They're the ensemble.
That's awesome. What was the inspiration to write that musical?
Well, the inspiration was a newspaper article that I read about a doctor in France who his wife had died very suddenly of ovarian cancer, and he loved her desperately, and she was taken from him very quickly, and he couldn't deal with it, so he froze her after she died. And he said, I know this is crazy. He said, I know, you know, people think about cryogenics. It's like a 1 in a million shot that anybody's coming back. But I love my wife so much, I'll take the one. Aww. He said, you know, I know it's 1 in a million. Mm-hmm. Give me the one, and maybe I'll see her again. And that was the genesis of the story. The newspaper article went on to describe that after he froze her, he put her in the basement. He put a freezer in the basement, and the French government came after him and said, you can't do this. It's unsanitary. We don't allow it. And he went to court, and he fought them, saying, I'm not hurting anybody, and I'm doing this because I love my wife, and I know it's a long shot. And so, he presented his case. The French government finally said, look, we'll let you do this only if you agree that once you die, that she will be buried, and this will end. And so they agreed to do that, and he sat with her for 18 years.
Oh my gosh!
And it got expensive to run the freezers. He would run tours through the chateau, and to defray the costs of. And after 18 years, he died, and his son froze him, put him next to the wife, and the government came after the son, and that was where it tweaked the newspaper articles. So, I read the article, and it just struck me. I said, this is a love story about a guy who loves his wife and can't let go. And so, so I took the story, I tweaked it a lot.
Yeah.
And brought in, Ted Williams, who is frozen.
Yes.
And
head.
Walt Disney, who's rumored to be frozen. There's an urban legend about Walt Disney. He's frozen and buried under Pirates of the Caribbean. And Michael Jackson, who is plausibly frozen somewhere. I mean, I would not be surprised. So, so we made them our frozen ghosts, and, half the show happens on, in real life, and half of it, part of it happens in heaven, where these guys are waiting to come back, and Ted Williams conducts batting practice in heaven, I'm sure.
Where do you stand on this? Do you think at some point we're going to be able to regenerate brains and people?
Closer. Hypothermia, as a medical treatment is now established. I mean, they're the lowering of body temperature, for open heart surgery and for shotgun, for major shotgun wounds is very well established now. And they freeze lobsters to ship them. And then they revive them. I think it's just a matter of time before they figure out the chemistry.
Now, you did a reading of that show a couple of years ago. Where does it stand today?
Oh, it was kind of interesting. We submitted it to a contest. One of the readings we did, we submitted to a contest in Germany, and they flew us over to Munich, to do it there. We got a nice response. We've done a bunch of readings, and the process for new work is readings, and putting it out there and refining it, because you really don't know about a show until you put it up in front of an audience. You can, it's on the page, and then you put it up in front of an audience, and you go, what an idiot! Why did I do that? So the ultimate proof, of a show is is constant readings and constant revision, and hopefully it starts pulling together. And Love on Ice is pulling together. I have a terrific. Jeff Loden did the music. Bill Squire did the book with me and some of the lyrics with me, and and it's everybody loves the project. We just have to, and part of it's timing too. You have to, the timing of a show has to be right.
When it makes it to Broadway, Nick and I will be calling you for that backstage
there you
tour.
go.
Yeah, I would love to see that. Show sounds so awesome.
It does, doesn't it? So
yeah, and Broadway's gotten to be a funny place. There are production limitations. Producing is very expensive, and talking about developing a show at a regional theater or at a university, this is a big show. Shows that have 4, 5, 6 people, which is what many writers do now, because you can't get, it's just the logistics and the expense of producing a show. The trend is to smaller casts, and it's a big show. So one of the things that works against us is that we're too big for a lot of theaters.
Okay.
So we really mine the the reading circuit.
So another show you wrote, Take Me America, follows refugees seeking asylum in the United States. And it won Best Musical at the 2007 Midtown International Theater Festival in New York. And New York Magazine hailed it a must-see. What became of that show?
We were lucky enough to get that show produced. We submitted it to the Village Theater in Issaquah, Washington, as part of their New Works Festival. We went up there and did it as a new work. They liked it well enough that we opened the season for them. I guess it was the following year, and we ran for 4 months at the Village Theater in Issaquah, and it was a 600-seat house. We had a $500,000 budget. It was a bolt of lightning, and we were pleased.
That's cool.
So much of my career I attribute to bolts of lightning. That was one of them. But two of my shows that went to Broadway were literally of that ilk. Most Happy Fella, we were doing it at Goodspeed Opera House in Connecticut, and Broadway critics came and saw it, said, somebody take the show to Broadway. They did. Sweeney Todd, same thing happened. We were doing it at a small off-Broadway house. Somebody said, Broadway critics said, take the show to Broadway. They did. I mean, serendipity and lightning bolts are definitely a part of on my resume.
Lastly, a play called Lying to Spielberg. It's about a Holocaust survivor who has an offer on the table from Spielberg to film his story, make it into a movie, until a visitor challenges his story of events. The play was a part of Utah Shakespeare's New American Theater project. Did it take flight from there?
I'm still working on it. I've done readings in New York with it. I recently dramaturged it with the Abingdon Theater in New York, and because of the musical writing that I've been doing, it got backburnered, we did it at Utah Shakes, and then Take Me America happened, and then Love on Ice happened, and so I had to get back to it. We recently did when we were in Fort Atkinson. We did a reading with the actors of Miracle on 34th Street, so it's now in pretty good shape, and I'm pretty happy. But it's taken a long time. It's an interesting story. It's based on a lot of Holocaust stories that are in my family. The impetus for the play was the fact that my mother was asked by the Spielberg Shoah Foundation to tell her story. She escaped from a concentration camp, and as did my father. And they were asked my mother actually had her story filmed for the Spielberg Shoah Foundation, which Steven Spielberg established at USC. It's a library of Holocaust survivors telling their stories. And then also, one of the things that happened to this group of people that I know was a guy knocked on the door 50 years after the war ended, and he said, I think I'm your son from a one-night stand you had during the war.
Oh, wow.
So I put those things together and made a play out of it, and people get attracted to it.
So when you're writing a play, are you collaborating with other playwriters, or are you mostly writing by yourself?
Well, you write it by yourself, and then, like a musical, you present it, you do a reading of it, and to hear it, to see if it flows, to see if it's working, and you do it in a writer setting, so you're always getting feedback, and that's really important, to be in a group of smart, empathetic writers who are interested in the work. I went to see a new show last night that I thought was really pretty good. It was a reading of the show, and the first thing I did was say, I love the show. These are my ideas to make it better. And and I shot it off to him, and and that's people writers appreciate for the most part, not always, the critique, which ultimately it is, you try to make the criticism well-intentioned and constructive, and you have to be about the work. The ego has to go away. If the ego gets in the way, the work suffers, and you have problems. So you have to. I think the attitude toward criticism and constructive criticism is something that's really important to the writing process. Sometimes it's hard to deal with, but it's important.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I really appreciate you being with us. Before we let you go, Bill, I want to ask you about some television appearances you've had. You've been on some hit shows like Madam Secretary and The Blacklist, and Gossip
fun.
Girl.
I died on that one. That was good.
On which one?
On Madam Secretary.
Oh,
they shot me in a tunnel out on Long Island somewhere.
That's awesome.
Literally shot me. No, they shot me and they shot me.
They shot you and you died. Do you prefer on-camera work over live performances, or
no?
You are still theater at heart.
Different. It's different. There's the acting style is different. For the camera, you bring, stylistically, you bring everything really small because the camera magnifies everything you do. So the acting style has to change, and frequently you're shooting. You're not shooting. You're shooting according to location. You're not shooting to storyline. So stuff gets out of you shoot stuff out of order. I mean, I worked on that for 3-4 days in different locations in New York, around New York, and the work was fun. I had interestingly enough, one of my scenes was with Patrick Page, who was one of the Lumieres that I covered.
Oh my
Beauty and the
gosh!
Beast.
Little reunion.
So I walked onto the set and I said, "Hi, Patrick." "Hi, Bill. Let's do it." So, but I mean, it's fun. It's different. But live is the best.
Okay. Did you get to work with James Spader on Blacklist, or did you not have
I
scenes?
did, yeah. I was. We had a scene. I was a surgeon there, and we were doing brain surgery on somebody.
Wow.
And it was. He was very nice, very supportive, outgoing. You could talk to him. Interested in the work. Not all people are like that, but he was very nice.
Is he real serious, like off camera?
No, I wouldn't say. No, not. He's very approachable.
Okay.
I mean, he's certainly about the work, but he's not unapproachable.
That's awesome. He's one of my favorites. I've watched him since The Practice and Boston
good, yeah.
Legal.
I haven't watched the show in a long time, but there was an article in I think it was the Times, this week about him and the show.
Huh. He's
he's
always going to be my favorite.
He has insights, he's an insightful guy, and I always enjoy watching him act. Number one, and number two, his insights are always interesting to me.
So, what else are you working on, and where can we see you next?
Well, the next thing I'm doing is I'm doing a reading of a play up at Quinnipiac College in New Haven with a couple of Yale people, Yale drama people, Next week, I think I'm doing that, and other than that, we're diving back into to Love on Ice and Lying to Spielberg, and I am kind of casting around for another idea. After that, I have a couple, but those things like perk around until they they jump up and you really get into them. So I'm always looking for for acting work and readings, which I really enjoy. And I'm honestly, I've done a lot of acting.
Yeah.
And while I enjoy it, it's not my. I can pick and choose, the projects that I want to do there. It's, I'm auditioning for Irish Rep next week for the Seafarer, which is a play which I'm kind of interested in. I'm not sure they're going to hire me. In fact, they probably won't. But I liked. I'm not about the paycheck so much anymore as I am, really doing stuff that interests me, and that's a luxury. I mean, I realize saying that, may come off a little snooty, but I'm fortunate. I've done a lot of stuff and a lot of acting, and I gravitate toward the stuff that interests me, and I have to say the writing more than anything does that for now.
Are you active on social media? Do you have any accounts you want to promote?
I have a Facebook page. Yeah, you can. We can do that. I'm not fond of it, but yeah, you can find me.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thanks, Bill, so much for joining us. This has been a really good time.
Oh, how delightful! Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And you guys are on it. I mean, you did your research. You've made it interesting for me. And if you make it interesting for me, I think your podcast people will like it too. And I wish you the best.
Thank you so much, and thanks for being on the show.
I have to say, that's a talent. I mean, I cannot tell you how many people I know started out, doing exactly what you're doing, and then 15 years you go back there and I remember when they started doing that, and you move on and you evolve, and it's part of this business is you have to do the first thing. And you've done that, and hats off to you. I look forward to seeing where you guys end up, too.
All right.
All the best to you guys. Thanks for calling.
So much.
Thank
Have
you.
a great day.
Be well.
Our thanks to Bill Nabel for joining us today on the show. That was really insightful.
Loved him.
I know. He's got good stories about celebrities and fans, and it just fit what we do so well.
It did. I love anything that makes me feel good, as you know, and I left this interview feeling good.
I hope you did too.
It's hard to feel bad on Broadway.
Right.
I mean, you get that 2 hours of escapeness, and you get to feel good and walk away in that little fantasy land. It's like going to the movies. And,
it's even better.
Yeah, and what a cool guy. Can you believe that? 13 years in one musical and 8 years in another?
It's flooring. It just floors me to think about that.
That's outstanding.
Yeah. Very rare. Very rare.
Yeah, how cool is that?
All right, join us next week because guess what? We've got Linda Gray.
I know!
From Dallas. She's going to be joining us on the program.
Some of you may not be old enough to remember Linda Gray, but I do.
Come on, she was just in Dallas a little while ago.
She was.
And she's in tons of TV movies.
Yes.
So.
Oh my gosh, I just loved her.
All right, so come back next week for another episode of Fancounters.